The rope binding Kestrel's wrists burned against her copper skin as she struggled against the wooden post. Her twin sister Nightingale hung limp beside her, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. Both Apache women had been captured 3 days ago during the raid on their village, and now they were being presented like cattle at the town square of Dusty Creek. "For your heroic defense of our settlement, Mr. Flint Ravencrest," Mayor Josiah Thornwick announced with theatrical flourish, "the town council awards you these 2 Apache slaves as compensation for your valor." Flint stood frozen, his weathered hand still gripping his Winchester rifle. The 28-year-old rancher had indeed fought off the raiders who'd threatened the town, but this wasn't what he'd expected as gratitude. His steel-gray eyes met Kestrel's defiant gaze, and something twisted in his chest at the rage and pain he saw there. "I don't want slaves," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the crowd's murmur. Mayor Thornwick's smile faltered. "Now see here, Flint. These are prime specimens. The dark-haired one there fought like a wildcat, nearly took out 3 of our men before we subdued her." Kestrel spat blood onto the dusty ground, her obsidian eyes never leaving Flint's face. Even bound and beaten, she radiated a fierce pride that reminded him of the wild mustangs he'd tried to break on his ranch. Her sister Nightingale finally lifted her head, revealing identical features but gentler brown eyes that held more sorrow than anger. "What are their names?" Flint asked, stepping closer despite the crowd's expectant silence. "Names," Thornwick laughed. "They're Indians, boy. Call them whatever you like." 8. The casual cruelty in the mayor's voice made Flint's jaw clench. He'd grown up hearing his grandfather's stories about the Apache, their connection to the land, their complex society. These weren't animals to be owned. "Said I don't want slaves," Flint repeated, louder this time. He pulled out his hunting knife and several townspeople stepped back nervously. Instead of threatening anyone, he strode to the post and cut the ropes binding both women. Kestrel stumbled, but caught herself, rubbing her raw wrists while eyeing Flint warily. Nightingale remained seated, too weak to stand. "What in tarnation are you doing?" Thornwick sputtered. "These savages will scalp us all in our sleep." "Maybe we shouldn't have raided their village first," Flint said coldly, earning gasps from the crowd. He knew the truth. The townsmen had attacked the Apache camp looking for horses, and the Indians had merely retaliated. He turned to face Kestrel directly. "You're free, both of you." For the first time since her capture, uncertainty flickered across Kestrel's features. She said something in Apache to her sister, who responded weakly. The crowd grew restless, muttering about ungrateful heroes and dangerous precedents. "Free to go where?" Kestrel finally spoke in accented English, her voice hoarse but strong. "Your people destroyed our village, killed our family." The weight of that truth settled over Flint like a heavy blanket. Freedom meant nothing without somewhere to go, without people to return to. He made a decision that would change everything. "Then stay at my ranch, not as slaves, as guests, until you decide what you want to do." Kestrel's hand instinctively moved to where her knife should have been as she surveyed Flint's ranch house. The modest adobe structure sat in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills dotted with cattle, far enough from Dusty Creek to offer privacy, but close enough that this could still be a trap. "Why?" she asked bluntly, supporting her still weak sister. Against her shoulder, Flint paused in lighting the oil lamp, his rugged profile cast in golden shadows. "Because it's right." "Oh. White men don't usually care about what's right for Apache." He turned to face her fully, and she was surprised by the pain she glimpsed in his gray eyes. "My grandfather was Cherokee, quarter blood, but enough to teach me that all people bleed the same." This revelation shifted something in Kestrel's perception. She'd assumed he was just another land-grabbing settler. But Cherokee blood explained. The respectful way he'd spoken to them, the absence of the casual hatred she'd expected. Nightingale swayed on her feet, and Flint immediately moved to help steady her. "She needs rest and medical attention." "Don't touch her," Kestrel warned, but her sister placed a gentle hand on her arm. "He freed us, sister," Nightingale whispered in Apache. "Let him help." Reluctantly, Kestrel allowed Flint to guide them to the main bedroom. The room was spartanly furnished but clean, with a large bed covered in colorful quilts that looked handmade. "This is your room," Kestrel observed, suspiciously. "I'll sleep in the barn." Flint began pulling medical supplies from a chest. "I've doctored plenty of injured cattle. Human wounds aren't much different." As he cleaned Nightingale's head wound with gentle efficiency, Kestrel studied him. His hands were scarred from ranch work, but moved with surprising tenderness. When he caught her staring, she looked away quickly. "What happened to your family?" she found herself asking. "Smallpox 5 years ago. Parents' younger brother, my wife." His voice remained steady, but she heard the old grief underneath. "Been alone since then?" The parallel struck her. Both of them had lost everything. Both were survivors carrying invisible wounds. But she couldn't afford to sympathize. Trust was a luxury Apache couldn't afford with white men. Over the following days, an uneasy routine developed. Flint worked his ranch while the sisters recovered, leaving food and supplies but giving them space. Kestrel remained vigilant, convinced this kindness was temporary. She explored the property, mapping escape routes and testing Flint's boundaries. On the 4th evening, she found him sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her painfully of home. "What are you making?" she asked. Settling on the porch steps, but maintaining distance. He held up the partially carved figure horse in mid-gallop. "Its mane flowing. Used to carve toys for my brother when we were kids." "You have skilled hands." The compliment slipped out before she could stop it. He glanced at her, surprised by the almost friendly tone. "Your English is excellent. Missionary school. Before I realized they wanted to kill the Apache in me to save the Christian." Bitterness crept into her voice. "But languages are useful for survival." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and for the first time since her capture, Kestrel felt something other than anger or fear. It was dangerous, this growing sense of safety. But her exhausted spirit craved it like water in the desert. 3 weeks into their stay, Kestrel discovered Flint talking quietly to his horses in Cherokee. She'd approached the corral, intending to ask about borrowing a mount for hunting, but stopped when she heard the familiar cadence of her grandmother's neighboring tribal tongue. "You speak it well?" she said, startling him. Flint straightened, color rising in his weathered cheeks. "Grandfather insisted I learn, though I'm probably rusty." "No, it's good. Your accent is almost perfect." She climbed onto the fence rail, noting how the horses moved easily around him. "They trust you. Horses are honest. They don't judge you by your blood or your past, just by how you treat them." Like the comment hung between them, loaded with meaning. Kestrel found herself studying his profile again, the strong jaw softened by laugh lines, the gentle way he handled the animals. Dangerous thoughts for a woman whose people were still being hunted and killed by men who looked just like him. "Nightingale is well enough to travel," she said abruptly, his hand stilled on the horse's neck. "Where will you go?" "North. Maybe. Find other survivors? Winter's coming. Travel will be hard." She knew he was right, but staying meant acknowledging the growing feelings she couldn't afford. Every evening, they'd begun sharing the porch, talking about everything except the obvious attraction crackling between them. Every morning she woke, thinking about his quiet kindness, his respectful distance, the way he unconsciously hummed Cherokee lullabies while working. That afternoon, riders from town appeared on the horizon. Kestrel and Nightingale immediately moved to the back of the house, while Flint went to meet them. Through the window, Kestrel watched Mayor Thornwick gesturing angrily, while 2 other men flanked him. Harboring dangerous savages, Thornwick's voice carried on the wind. "Town's getting nervous, Flint. People think you've gone soft." "What I do on my own land is my business," Flint replied steadily. "Not when it threatens the community. We want them gone." Kestrel's blood chilled. She'd expected this kindness from white men. Always came with conditions and expiration dates. "They're not threatening anyone," Flint said. "That's what you think. But folks are saying maybe you've been ... top compromised. Living alone with 2 Indian women. People talk." The implication hit Kestrel like a physical blow. Of course, the town would assume the worst, would see her presence as proof of moral failing rather than simple human decency. off my land." Flint's voice turned deadly. Quiet. After the men rode away, he found Kestrel packing their few belongings. "You heard?" "I heard." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "We'll leave tonight." "You don't have to." "Yes, we do." She spun to face him, anger masking the pain of knowing her instincts had been right all along. This was always temporary. "I was foolish to think otherwise, Kestrel. Wait." He caught her arm gently. "What if you didn't have to choose between staying and leaving? What if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" His gray eyes searched hers intently. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like a gunshot's echo. Kestrel stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "As my wife, you'd have legal protection. Both of you could stay safely." "A marriage of convenience," she said slowly, testing the words. "If that's... what do you want to call it?" But the way he was looking at her suggested it would be anything but convenient for either of their hearts. "You're insane," Nightingale whispered in Apache, as Kestrel paced their temporary shelter in Flint's barn. "Marriage to a white man? Our ancestors would haunt us forever." "It's not real marriage," Kestrel insisted, though the lie tasted bitter. "It's survival. Legal protection." "And what happens when he expects? Marital duties?" The question Kestrel had been avoiding crashed over her. She'd seen the way Flint looked at her, not with the possessive hunger she'd expected from white men, but with something deeper that terrified her more than lust ever could. "He won't," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "He's been nothing but respectful. Respectful men can still want women in their beds." The truth was, Kestrel had been fighting her own desires for weeks, the way Flint's hands looked when he worked with leather, gentle but sure. "Ow!" He unconsciously hummed while cooking, creating domestic music that made her heart ache for normalcy. The protective fury in his eyes when the townsman had threatened them. "Sister," Nightingale said. Softly, "You care for him." Kestrel stopped pacing. "I care about surviving." "Eh? Those aren't the same thing anymore." The next morning, Flint hitched his wagon for the ride to town. Kestrel had agreed to the marriage, but seeing him in his best clothes, clean-shaven with his dark hair combed back, made her stomach flutter with nerves that had nothing to do with the legal ceremony ahead. "You look," he started, then stopped, color rising in his cheeks. She'd chosen her only remaining dress, a deep blue cotton that complemented her dark hair and bronze skin. It was simple but clean, and she'd braided her hair with small white flowers Nightingale had found. "Different," he finally finished. "Different good or different bad?" "Beautiful," he said quietly. "You look beautiful." The compliment sent heat through her chest, dangerous and unwelcome. This was business, she reminded herself. Protection, not romance. The ceremony at Dusty Creek's small church drew curious stares and whispered comments. Judge Morrison looked deeply uncomfortable as he performed the service, clearly disapproving but unable to find legal grounds for refusal. Mayor Thornwick watched from the back with undisguised hostility. "Do you, Flint Ravencrest, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. And do you, Kestrel?" The judge paused, realizing he didn't know her Apache name. "Kestrel Ravencrest," she said firmly, claiming his surname like armor. "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She met Flint's eyes, seeing quiet determination mixed with something that looked dangerously like hope. "I do." The kiss that sealed their marriage was brief but electric. Flint's lips were warm and careful against hers, and for a moment, Kestrel forgot they had an audience, forgot this was pretense. When they broke apart, his eyes were dark with an emotion she didn't want to name. "Congratulations, Mrs. Ravencrest," he murmured. The name sent shivers down her spine. The ride home passed in charged silence. Nightingale dozed in the wagon bed while Kestrel sat rigidly beside her new husband, hyper-aware of every bump that pressed their shoulders together. "We should talk about expectations," she said finally. "What kind of expectations? Sleeping arrangements, duties, what people will assume versus what's actually... Kestrel?" His voice was gentle but firm. "Nothing changes unless you want it to. You have my word." The promise should have relieved her. Instead, it left her oddly disappointed, as if some part of her had been hoping he would demand more. Give her an excuse to explore these dangerous feelings without admitting she wanted to. That evening, they maintained their routine of shared dinner, followed by conversation on the porch. But now, a gold band circled Kestrel's finger, and every casual comment felt weighted with new meaning. "Do you regret it?" Flint asked, as stars appeared overhead. "The marriage?" "No, it was practical. That's not what I meant." She knew what he meant did. She'll regret the growing connection between them, the way her heart raced when he smiled, the comfort she found in his presence. Did she regret caring about a man whose people had destroyed her world? "Ask me in a year," she said quietly. In the darkness, she didn't see him smile. Winter arrived early and harsh, trapping them together in the ranch house for days at a time. What had begun as polite cohabitation slowly transformed into something more intimate, not physically, but emotionally. Kestrel found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the comfortable silence as they worked side by side preparing meals. The first crack in her armor came during a blizzard in December. She woke to find Flint burning with fever, delirious and shaking despite the heavy quilts piled on his makeshift bed in the living room. "Nightingale," she called urgently, "help me get him to the bedroom." "Why not leave him there?" her sister asked, though. She was already moving to help. "Because he'll die from cold. The fireplace heats that room better." They managed to drag Flint's burning body to the big bed, where Kestrel spent the next 3 days nursing him through the fever. She cooled his brow with wet cloths, forced water between his cracked lips, and listened to him mumble incoherently in Cherokee and English, sometimes calling for his dead wife, sometimes whispering her own name with heartbreaking longing. On the 3rd night, his fever broke. Kestrel dozed in the chair beside the bed, exhausted from her vigil, when his weak voice woke her. "Kestrel, I'm here." She moved to check his temperature, relief flooding through her when she found his skin cool and normal. "You stayed?" "I stayed. You're my—" She paused, uncertain what word to use. Husband felt too intimate, but protector seemed inadequate. "I dreamed about you," he said quietly, "about us. Things that felt more real than fever dreams should feel. Dangerous territory." She should deflect, make a joke, change the subject. Instead, she heard herself asking, "What kind of things?" Growing old together. Children with your eyes and stubborn streak. A real marriage, not just legal papers. The honesty in his voice broke something loose inside her chest. "Flint, I know it's not what you signed up for. I know I'm asking too much. But these weeks together, seeing who you really are when you're not guarding yourself, fallen in love with you, Kestrel, completely, hopelessly in love." The word she'd been dreading and craving in equal measure hung between them. She could deny her own feelings, could retreat behind practical concerns and cultural differences. Or she could acknowledge the truth. That had been growing stronger every day. "I never planned for this," she whispered. "Neither did I. After Margaret died, I thought I was done with love. And you walked into my life with fire in your eyes and pride in every step, and suddenly I was alive again." Margaret. His first wife's name spoken without pain for the first time since she'd known him. The significance wasn't lost on her. "Your people destroyed mine," she said, testing one last barrier. "Some of my people. Just like some of your people raided settlements and killed families. We can't be responsible for every sin our races have committed against each other. The town will never accept an Apache as your real wife, so the town can go to hell. I don't need their approval to love you." Love, he'd said it again, simply and without apology. Kestrel felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling like paper in rain. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I. But maybe we could be scared together instead of apart." She studied his face in the lamplight, the honest gray eyes. The mouth she'd kissed exactly once but dreamed about constantly, the gentle hands that had never once been raised to her in anger, despite having every legal right to do so. "If I really stay, as your real Wi-Fi need promises? Anything. No more sleeping in the barn. Share the bed in the bedroom like married people do." Heat flared in his eyes. "KSTREL ... I'm not finished." Nightingale stays as long as she wants, as family, not as a burden. And if we have children, they learn Apache ways as well as white ways. They know their heritage. Children, he repeated wonderingly. Is that a yes to my terms? Instead of answering with words, he reached up to cup her face with his palm, thumb brushing across her cheek. When she leaned into the touch, instead of pulling away, he smiled with such radiant joy that it took her breath away. Mrs. Ravencrest, he said, I believe we have a real marriage to begin. Spring brought more than melting snow and green grass to the Ravencrest ranch. It brought the first signs of the life growing inside Kestrel's belly. And with it, a fierce protective instinct that surprised even her. Your glowing nightingale, observed one morning as they worked in the garden they'd planted behind the house. Marriage to the cowboy agrees with you. Kestrel touched her still flat stomach, where their secret grew. She hadn't told Flint yet, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. But the morning sickness and missed monthly bleeding left little doubt. He wants to build a school, she said, deflecting from her sister's knowing look, for the children of any Apache families who might settle nearby. And you believe him? I've learned to believe his actions more than his words, though his words have become precious too. It was true. Over the winter months, Flint had proven his devotion not through grand gestures, but through countless small ones. Learning Apache phrases to communicate better with Nightingale, researching tribal customs so he could honor Kestrel's heritage, defending their marriage to anyone who dared question it, including his own distant relatives who'd written scathing letters about his savage wife. That afternoon brought unwelcome visitors. A cavalry patrol rode up to the ranch, led by Captain Morrison, Judge Morrison's younger brother, whose hatred for Indians was well known throughout the territory. Afternoon, Ravencrest, Morrison called, not bothering to dismount. Heard you're harboring more Indians now? I'm harboring my wife and sister-in-law, Flint replied evenly, though Kestrel noticed his hand drift toward his rifle. Is there a problem with that? Depends. Word is you've got Apache families trying to settle on the North Ridge. Government policy is clear about reservation boundaries. Kestrel's heart sank. They had indeed been quietly helping displaced Apache. Families find temporary shelter on the far edges of Flint's land, but they'd hoped to keep it secret until more permanent arrangements could be made. The families on my land are my guests, Flint said. Unless you have specific charges to bring, I'll ask you to leave. This isn't over, Ravencrest. There are laws about aiding hostile Indians, and maybe you should learn them before coming on to private property making threats. After the soldiers left, Flint found Kestrel in the barn, brushing down his favorite mare with unusual vigor. They'll be back, she said, without looking at him, with more men and legal papers. Let them come. I've been researching territorial law. As long as the families aren't engaged in hostile activities, they have the right to free movement. Legal rights don't stop bullets. He moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. Kestrel, what aren't you telling me? She leaned back against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. I'm with child. His hands stilled, then tightened gently on her shoulders. Are you certain? Nearly 2 months along. She felt him take a shuddering breath. Then he turned her in his arms, his face radiant with joy and wonder. A baby. Our baby. Are you happy? She asked, suddenly uncertain. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed her forehead, then her. Lips then dropped to his knees to press his face against her belly. Hello in there, little one. Your mom and papa love you already? The sight of her strong husband kneeling before her, speaking tenderly to their unborn child, broke the last of Kestrel's emotional barriers. This was what she'd never dared hope for. A love that transcended race and history, a future where their children would grow up knowing they belonged to both worlds. We need to be more careful, she said, running her fingers through his dark hair. If Morrison finds out about the baby, ... he won't use our child against us. I won't let him. But even as he spoke the promise, they both knew the challenges ahead would test every aspect of their love and commitment. The territory was changing, and mixed families like theirs would face increasing hostility as more settlers arrived. That night, as they lay in their bed with Flint's hand resting protectively over their growing child, Kestrel made her own silent promise. Whatever came, she would fight for this love, this family, this unexpected life they'd built together. She'd been given a second chance at happiness. No cavalry patrol or small-minded town would take it from her. 2 years later, Kestrel stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching her husband teach their toddler son, Little Wolf, how to gentle a young horse. At 18 months, the boy already showed the same patient determination as his father and the fierce independence of his Apache mother. The school Flint had dreamed of was now a reality. A one-room building where Apache and white children learned, side by side. Nightingale taught traditional crafts and languages, while Flint handled reading, writing, and arithmetic. It had taken a hard-fought legal battle and the support of territorial judges who valued education over prejudice. But they'd won. "Mama, look," Little Wolf called in Apache, then repeated in English for his father's benefit. "Horse likes me." "Of course he does," Kestrel called back, one hand resting on her rounded belly, where their second child grew. "You have magic hands?" "Like Papa." The settlement on the North Ridge had grown into a thriving community of mixed Apache and white families, all drawn by the promise of peaceful coexistence. It wasn't perfect, tensions still flared, and they'd faced their share of conflicts, but it was working. Captain Morrison had been reassigned after his commanding officers grew tired of his complaints about the Indian problem that wasn't actually causing any problems. Mayor Thornwick had been voted out of office, replaced by a former teacher who supported the school and the integrated community. "You look thoughtful," Flint said, joining her on the porch as Nightingale took over Little Wolf's riding lesson. "Just remembering that first day in town square when you cut our ropes and said we were free. Best decision I ever made." Even with all the trouble it caused, he turned to face her fully, his gray eyes still holding the same love that had surprised her so completely, especially with all the trouble. Easy love isn't worth much. Love that survives everything thrown at it. That's the kind worth fighting for. Their second child chose that moment to kick vigorously, making Kestrel gasp and laugh. "This one's going to be a fighter too." Takes after his mother. "How do you know it's a he?" "Same way I knew I loved you the moment I saw you refuse to bow to anyone. Instinct." As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in the familiar oranges and purples that had once reminded her of loss, Kestrel reflected on the unexpected turns life could take. She'd been given to a white man as property and had instead found partnership. She'd expected cruelty and had received tenderness. She'd feared the loss of her Apache identity and had instead found ways to honor it while building something entirely new. "Do you ever regret it?" Flint asked quietly. "Staying with me instead of searching for other survivors?" "We found other survivors," she pointed out, gesturing toward the ridge where smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. "We created a place for them to thrive. I found something else too." "What's that?" "I found that love doesn't require abandoning who you are. It just requires finding someone who loves all the pieces of you, even the complicated ones." Little Wolf ran up to them, chattering excitedly in his mixture of Apache and English, about the horse and his aunt's stories and the new foal in the pasture. Flint scooped him up, settling him between them on the porch swing where they watched the stars appear. "Tell me the story again, Mama," Little Wolf demanded. "About how Papa freed you and you chose to stay?" As Kestrel began the tale their son. Never tired of hearing, she caught Flint's eye over their child's dark head. In his gaze she saw their past, their present, and their future, a love story that had begun with chains, broken, and had grown into something unbreakable. They had been given to each other by circumstances neither had chosen. Each other every day since. In a territory where love was often a luxury few could afford, they had created their own country where two hearts could be completely free.